I hope you had a great weekend and you're ready for another spectacular week. I want to get the week started off by recognizing some birthdays today. The first birthday is on April 22nd, Lily Wallaker. Happy birthday, Lily. We also, on April 23rd, have Landon Eichelberger's birthday. Happy birthday, Landon. On April 25th, Miss Stewart is celebrating a birthday. Happy birthday, Miss Stewart. And finally, another birthday this week is Finn from 3rd grade. He's celebrating a birthday on April 26th. Happy birthday, Finn. It's a great week to have a birthday. And now it is time to read chapter 9 in Spring According to Humphrey. Some of you will remember last week that Humphrey is celebrating spring break at Mrs. Brisbane's house. So let's find out what happens next. Chapter 9, A Change of Plans. The Brisbane's house was calm and cozy. I slept a lot more than I do in room 26. I guess maybe I needed a spring break just like everyone else. Early in the week, Mrs. Brisbane got a call from Cassie's mom. I knew that because I could hear Mrs. Brisbane say, "Thanks for calling me back. How is Cassie?" And, "I'm glad the doctor said she's fine." That was good news. Mrs. Brisbane listened for a while. Then she said, "If you're free, would you like to come over here so we could talk?" She paused and then said, "Yes, of course, Spring Cassie. I think Humphrey and Og could use some company." As much as I love the Brisbanes, it was true. I missed my classmates. After all, I am a classroom pet. Later in the day, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Brisbane led Cassie and her mom into the living room. I leaped up and squeaked, Hi, Cassie." Even Og splashed around in the water side of his tank. "Boing, boing, boing," he shouted. Cassie raced over to see us. She looked unsqueakably happy, as if her stomach didn't hurt at all. She asked if she could put me in my hamster ball, and before I knew it, I was rolling around the room. Mr. Brisbane offered them lemonade, and they all gathered around the living room table to talk. "The doctor said that Cassie gets very anxious about tests and things like that," Cassie's mom said. "Cassie told me you suggested deep breathing, which I think is great." "Does it help, Cassie?" Mrs. Brisbane asked. "Yes," Cassie said, "but sometimes I forget." Mrs. Brisbane nodded. "There are some other things you can try," she said. "For instance, getting plenty of exercise can help, like walking or running." A great idea. I always use exercise when I'm feeling out of control. To encourage Cassie, I decided to see how hard I could get my hamster ball spinning. Instead of just running forward, which makes the ball roll, I began to spin in a circle. "Look," Cassie said as she pointed at me. The ball was spinning round and round in a circle. In fact, the world around me was spinning so fast, I was getting a little bit dizzy. Boing, boing. Og sounded worried. My tummy felt funny, so I stopped spinning. When the ball was at a standstill, I looked up and saw Cassie spinning round and round in a circle too. "Be careful, Cassie," her mom said. "It's fun," Cassie said. She spun a little while longer and finally stopped. "How do you feel?" Mrs. Brisbane asked. Cassie caught her breath. "I feel good, more relaxed." "That's good," Mrs. Brisbane said. "But maybe walking is a little bit better than spinning." My head was still spinning, so I squeaked, "I think so." "Thank goodness," Cassie put me back in my cage. Mrs. Brisbane returned to the living room with a plate of oatmeal cookies. Cookies always make humans feel better. While everyone munched away, I hopped on my wheel for a good, fast spin. "Look," Mrs. Brisbane said, "I think Humphrey exercises to relax too." Cassie giggled, "But he doesn't take tests." "If you only knew," I squeaked. Mr. Brisbane passed the cookies around again. "When I was in school, I always thought I had to get every single answer right. If I missed just one question, I thought I'd failed." He chuckled. "But now I know that you don't have to be perfect all the time." "I worry about missing an answer too," Cassie said. Mr. Brisbane nodded. "But would the world come to an end if you got an answer wrong now and then?" Cassie hesitated, then shook her head. "I guess not." "Of course not, Cassie," her mom said. "You can never disappoint us. We know you try hard, and we're proud of what a good person you are." They hugged, which is something nice that humans do. "But please don't hug your hamsters. We could get hurt." "You don't have to be perfect, Cassie. Relax," her mom said. I know, Cassie sighed. There's something you can do about that, Mrs. Brisbane said. Whenever you have a negative thought, such as thinking you're going to fail, replace it with a positive thought. Cassie looked confused. When you hear that voice in your head saying that you're going to fail, just say to yourself, I know I'll do well on the test, Mrs. Brisbane said, because you know you are prepared. That's a good idea, isn't it, Og? I squeaked to my neighbor. Boing, boing, he replied. Suddenly, Cassie smiled. I guess I could do that. Besides, I always study a lot. Her mom smiled too. Try following Mrs. Brisbane's suggestions. Maybe your stomach won't hurt so much. I'm going to try those things too, I squeaked. I'm going to breathe deeply, get plenty of exercise, and replace my negative thoughts with positive ones. I suddenly felt lighter than air. I scrambled up the tree branch, grabbed the top rungs of my cage, and started swinging my way from one corner to the next. Look at Humphrey, Cassie laughed. He's quite a show-off, Mrs. Brisbane said. A show-off? Not me. I was just following Mrs. Brisbane's suggestions. Cassie came over to my cage to watch. I love you, Humphrey. You're so funny. Thanks, I squeaked as I dropped down at the bottom of my cage and did a triple somersault. Cassie laughed out loud. I hope you can come home with me sometime, she said. As I hopped onto my wheel and began to spin, I heard Mrs. Brisbane say something I didn't expect. Would you like to take him home now? She asked. Over spring break? Cassie was speechless. I was squeakless. What do you mean? Cassie's mom asked. Oh yes, Cassie said in a soft voice. I would love that. Mom, please. I think Humphrey would love that too, she said. I was still squeakless. I'd planned on spending a nice quiet week with the Brisbanes and Og. Suddenly, that wasn't going to happen. Do you know how to take care of him? Mrs. Brisbane asked. I have some instructions you can take with you. Cassie's hands were shaking. It's a big responsibility, her mom said. I want to, Cassie said. More than anything, can Og come with us too? Og hopped up and down. Boing, boing, he said. I think he wanted to go home with Cassie too. Well, Mr. Brisbane and I will be very lonely without one of the classroom pets, she said. Let's share. Cassie nodded, and before I knew it, her mom carried my cage out to the car. I barely had time to squeak. So long, Og, on my way out. I did hear a distant boing. All of my friends are excited when I come to their homes. So am I. But I don't think anyone was ever as excited to take me home as Cassie was. She was so excited she was swinging my cage a little too much for my wobbly tummy, but I understood. Where should I put him? She asked as she carried my cage through the door. In your room, I think, her mom said. I hope I can take good care of him. Cassie set my cage on her desk. You will, her mom said. You'll do a hamsterific job, I squeaked. Cassie got right to work, filling my water bottle and smoothing out my bedding. She straightened my wheel and gave me some vitamin drops, which are yummy. Later that night, her older sister, Cammie, came in to watch me spin on my wheel. I need exercise too, Cassie said as she ran in place. Cammie joined her, and pretty soon the whole room was shaking. After dinner, Cassie got into her pajamas and came back to her room. Would you like me to read you a story, she asked. I love reading stories. I didn't know that, but I enjoyed listening to her read from her fairy tale books. The first story was about a little girl who was no bigger than a thumb. As a tiny hamster, I could understand how unsqueakably scary it can be to be so small, but it had a happy ending. Then she read a more disturbing story about a frog prince. A princess doesn't like that the frog is a real prince, until she finally kisses him and he turns back into a prince. Isn't that a happy ending? Cassie asked as she closed the book. I had nothing to say. The thought that Og could be a prince or that a princess would kiss him was, disturbing. I love happy endings, Cassie said. Just then, her mom popped her head in the door. Time to go to sleep, she said. Did you brush your teeth? I did, Cassie said. Cassie's mom tucked her into bed and turned out the light. I'm so happy to have Humphrey here. I'm not sure if I can sleep, she said. Her mom suggested she try the breathing exercise Mrs. Brisbane had taught her. Once we were alone, I heard Cassie say, Come on, Humphrey, let's breathe. Actually, I breathe all the time, but that night we did it together. Breathe in slowly, she said. Hold. And slowly breathe out. We repeated that several times, but after a while, I didn't hear Cassie anymore. I was sound asleep. I think maybe she was too. Humphrey's spring things. We breathe in and out all through the day, but breathing like this makes worries float away. So if you're ever stressed out about a test or anything else, you might want to try that little breathing tip that Humphrey and Cassie do. All right, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow for Chapter 10.